Hi there, thanks for checking out our Prezi presentation. My name's Hilary Sutcliffe and I work for Matter, which is a think tank based in the UK, which helps to make new technologies work for us all. This is the first of a three-part initiative which explores the communications lessons for companies and governments from GM, asbestos and other techno disasters. Our aim with this project was to look at what steps can be taken to bring useful, safe products to market and avoid making the same mistakes all over again. This is the first phase, which goes back to basics to look at what the general public themselves want to know about company use of new technologies, particularly nanotechnologies in consumer products. We're then in the next two phases going to create tools to help companies respond and ask both businesses and other stakeholders to assess their usefulness. So here we're exploring what the public thinks and proposing recommendations for companies and for policymakers. So, how do we know what the public thinks? We didn't have the money to ask them ourselves, I'm afraid, so we drew our conclusions from the findings of 23 dialogue and research projects, which directly ask what people thought about various different new technologies and any worries they had and what issues they thought were important. We looked at nanotechnologies, synthetic biology and stem cell research in particular. If you want to look at the literature we reviewed and anything more about the project, take a look at the interactive debate graph that we've prepared on this. The URL's at the end of this presentation. You can add to our thinking too by joining in. So, what did we find? What did they want to hear about? The top line is, be open, explain yourselves better and don't duck the tricky issues. So, to go to a little bit more detail. Number one, the most important, was to know when a technology is being used, particularly in consumer products which are available now. That seems like a no-brainer, you'd think, but there are over 1,000 products available worldwide, over 350 at least in Europe, using various different types of nanotechnologies, in all likelihood safely and very usefully. But we did a snapshot trawl of the company websites a little while ago and found virtually nothing available for the public anywhere. If you want to know more about that, take a look at this website. It's the Project on Emerging Nanotechnologies Consumer Products Inventory at the Woodrow Wilson Center in Washington. It's not a comprehensive list of nano-enabled products, but it's a good start. In fact, if nanotechnology is new to you altogether, you might want to look at our pilot website, nanoandme.org, to find out more. But this might surprise you. You might think, well, the public's notoriously not interested in any of this boring technical stuff. You can't take any notice of that. But we think that perhaps the spookier the technology, the more people feel they want to know more about what's involved. And in fact, the more companies find innovative ways of engaging and communicating with customers and the wider public, the more they'll benefit from increased trust and confidence. But more of that in the next phase. So, number two, why are you doing it? There were concerns that scientists were just perhaps using new technologies to see if they can, or companies to prize them from their hard-earned cash. People wanted to see the real benefit of the technology, either to them or to the environment, and get a much fuller picture of how that's been come about. And that's not just the sales spiel about fewer wrinkles killing more germs, but people want to feel that companies have thought through the wider implications and benefits of the use of these technologies and communicate with them accordingly. I think that even incremental product developments or pricing initiatives based on new technologies can be seen as valid if the communication is clear and honest. So, for example, if you're communicating this richer picture, what problem is being solved? Do we really need it? How does it improve on existing solutions? What will it do for me or for the environment? Have you thought through any of the potential repercussions of its use? Are there potential negative implications, and what are you doing about that? Number three, when it all goes wrong, who carries the can? Interestingly, people are realistic. They know that from time to time things do go wrong. But we saw that rather than a deeply precautionary approach, i.e. just don't do it until you're absolutely certain, people wanted to know that the system was working, that regulation worked, oversight, anticipatory governance was being implemented. In fact, we were surprised that product safety fears came up relatively rarely, but concerns about the system came up all the time. The public wanted to know who's responsible, who's liable, and has someone thought about how it gets put right if something does go wrong? So you can see there are concerns about the product, but also worries that the system was working. This has implications both of oversight and communications for governments and regulators and others, not just businesses, to communicate more effectively. But because of these concerns, there was a feeling that independent oversight is particularly important. Not that companies or governments were necessarily doing something wrong or that products weren't safe, but that someone independent was on the case to keep an eye on the overseers as well. Where safety issues were raised, they were often in the context of the importance of choice. They didn't want these technologies to be forced on them. So discussions about labelling in particular focused on the need to decide themselves whether or not this was a technology they wanted, not particular concerns about safety. Other stakeholders did express concern about the lack of information about nanotechnologies in particular. There was a feeling that companies were using these technologies in secret, deliberately trying to keep the public in the dark about how the technologies are used, smuggling them into products. However, I can also see that there are legitimate concerns from companies that information they put out will be misused and perfectly useful technologies demonised unnecessarily. There's also growing pro-GM backlash among many journalists, scientists and ordinary people who feel that as a technology they didn't get the full picture and perhaps the baby was thrown out with the bathwater, to use a particularly British phrase. But the evidence we saw was that all the dialogue show there is real support for products where the benefit is clear, the safety and efficacy proven and information given to the public is meaningful. And we feel strongly that if companies can communicate clearly and openly about their products and processes, then their fears of misrepresentation may be misplaced. But silence doesn't build anyone's confidence. It's not too late to start. So, what is the learning for companies? Showing where and how you use nanotechnologies in your products is a basic starting point. I've put here Sultan from Boots. This is a bit of a poster child for the responsible development of a product using nanotechnologies. The partnership between Boots and Oxonica, who developed the nano ingredient Optisol, was a really great story. A university spin-off, business partnership, bespoke safety testing. But here on the Boots website, nothing much of the really useful and interesting work went into its development. I can see why they might be nervous, it's understandable, but I think they chickened out using the N word to the detriment of their own brand and the ology as a whole, and that's a pity. This is one of the reasons we developed Nano and Me that I mentioned previously, so that the public could access information about products in the context of impartial, measured and thoughtful detail about nanotechnologies as a whole. This is a pilot which is old now, but it was created and funded by the UK government in direct response to the public's desire for impartial information, so they could see the wood from the trees. Companies and governments should support these type of initiatives. If anyone has any cash to carry it on, do send me an email. The address is at the end of this presentation. Sorry for the sales spiel there. So, if you have a great idea for a product or an enhancement, as part of the development process, look more thoroughly at a benefit assessment. This means looking at the benefit in a more holistic way. Get independent assessments or stakeholder contributions, including from the public. So you have a great new product or enhancement, ditch the bog standard sales patter, be innovative about how you communicate, and give a much richer picture of why the use of the technology is a good one, both for you, which is also allowed, and for the public. The web's great for that, so use it to its fullest potential. Here's another of our thinking here, showing your workings. This is about, you have these little kids like mine who are doing math at the age of 10, and they come up with the answer, da-da! But actually, the question's not answered until you've shown your workings. This is an analogy, I think, too, for companies. Show us that you've done the benefit assessment, the risk assessment, the toxicology. Show us the processes and the systems you've got in place to demonstrate these products are safe to bring to market. Your communication up and down the supply chain is essential. to build confidence in the whole process. Some companies like BASF and here Evonik in the chemical industry are starting to do some good work in this area. Governance is another area. Much of what we've been talking about already comes under that heading. Transparency, benefit and risk assessment, stakeholder engagement. Use these tools, like this one, the Responsible Nanocode that we developed with a multi-stakeholder steering group. Good people have thought through these issues to help companies small, medium and large to build customer, investor and stakeholder confidence in these nano-enabled products. Share toxicology data, for example. There are issues with intellectual property which may arise, but most companies are quite happy to share their toxicology data to show what they've been doing to demonstrate these products are safe and to add to the body of evidence internationally about safety of nanomaterials. Submit these to relevant inventories, particularly the international ones, to have a look there at the Safe Nano community, for example. Engage with your stakeholders. It's a pretty trite thing to say, and we all do more on that in our next phase, but there are many ways and reasons to listen, explore, even co-create things with your stakeholders. I heard one large company recently saying they were going to embrace the brains of the world to help them understand their customers better and bring relevant products to market. BASF, the big chemical company, are doing some interesting work here also with their multi-stakeholder forum. So we believe that the right information, presented openly and honestly, will demonstrate corporate responsibility and build the confidence of your customers, investors and other stakeholders. So let's have a look at learning for policymakers. You can incentivise this transparency. There's been some work to inspire and impel transparency with varying success. More can be done with this, both on a voluntary basis and with regulation, to inspire and motivate companies to disclose meaningful information. Think innovatively and think about how these sorts of initiatives can be made to work for more than one stakeholder, perhaps on more than one level. Support the work which is going on in universities and elsewhere about the development of benefit assessments. We all really need to think through this implication about how some of these technologies, though not all of these, are used and how they will affect us all. Incentivising and impelling data sharing on toxicology in particular. There are more innovative ways of doing that. Policymakers internationally should consider this, how they can pull together to do more of this work. Building the capacity of independent oversight and technology assessment bodies is also important. The public stress the importance of reassurance from independent sources, but in order to do their job properly, they need funding and support. In the UK, what has been called the bonfire of the quangos has seen the culling of a lot of these independent groups, which also could look like squashing of diverse opinion, if you look at it from another angle, from climate change to data privacy. Technology assessment bodies, like for example this Danish Board of Technology, the public have actually asked for. Let's look how we can find ways of paying for those. Explain the impact and influence of your engagement with the public. This is the one thing we noticed looking throughout these dialogues, which were mainly paid for by governments, was that very rarely do the sponsoring organisations come back to that group and say, this is how the public dialogues influenced our actions, and communicate that to a wider audience. This is essential for governments and companies to show the public that they've taken their views seriously, they've not wasted their time and money, usually taxpayers' money, and that they are acting upon their views. And where they are not, which is perfectly legitimate, why not? Most organisations have to do this an awful lot better. But finally, develop a clear vision for how these new technologies can be used for social benefit. Support research, incentivise business, and use public purchasing to ensure that we make the most of the innovation which is available to us to help solve some of the most pressing problems of the day. So, thank you very much for your time there. This presentation was prepared by me, Hilary Sutcliffe, and by Mike King, who undertook the research into public views and expectations. Our contact details are below, so look us up and get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.